Well, Alan Burrows is joining us here. He's head of the Manx Landlords Association in the Isle of Man. Now, we've been hearing a lot about this landlord bill. I've heard a lot about it, but I've never really got to grips with this story. So if you don't mind, because I know, as an association, you're very keen on what's going on here, can you take us through the sort of outline of what is being proposed by the government with this new bill?
Government have basically released an 80-page document which is aimed at registration of landlords. The primary aim, according to the DOI, is so that they have better visibility of the sector as a whole. Within the proposed legislation are improvements to insulation standards, property standards in general, registration of landlords, minimum standards for renting properties.
Yeah, I mean, is this about rogue landlords then? Is this where they're sort of aiming their sights at, is it?
They say it's about improved visibility of the sector. Right. I think if we look at rogue landlords, there's such a small percentage of them, not all in the private sector. We have poor standards of accommodation within public sector as well as private sector, but it's such a small minority that the legislation really is something of an overkill.
So is it completely unregulated at the minute? I mean, is there any
No, it's not unregulated. There are powers available that government could use to control any rogue landlords, as you call them. There is legislation in place that would allow relevant agencies to deal with properties that were below standard or substandard. So that legislation exists at the moment.
So what are your concerns about this bill then?
Our primary concerns are unintended consequences. Let me give you an example of unintended consequences. We, within the Act, we are likely to have to improve standards to insulation standards. Let's start with that one. We've got a number of properties within the association based in town, and they're all Victorian properties. Now, within the proposed legislation, our members are going to be asked to improve those to modern insulation standards, for instance.
Okay, so there's going to be a code.
There's already a code, but there is no requirement at the moment for properties to meet higher standards, which will occur within.
So the government could step in and tell a landlord to do up their property to a certain degree?
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely. But the unintended consequences of this are that for these Victorian properties to meet current day building control standards is simply uneconomical. And I know, for instance, one that was in the course of renovation, and it cost about £15,000 per apartment to get them up to meet the current building standard regulations, which is fine if you're renovating a property. But there are a large number of properties in town that are all fully let, and it's simply impossible for those landlords to be able to meet these standards in any economical way with tenants in them at the moment. Okay. So all we're going to do is take those properties out of the market.
Would you also therefore have to put the rent on these properties because you invested more money in them?
Well, you would, but let's take a step back from that.
Yeah.
We have a hypothetical property with 6-8 apartments in it. All the tenants are currently happy in those apartments.
Oh, well, that's half the thing, of course. If people are happy, but if there's discontent, I can see there be problems.
Oh, absolutely.
If they're getting cold because there's not enough.
Absolutely, but let me tell you, in a recent survey, 95% of tenants stated that they were happy in their current accommodation and with their current landlords.
Okay.
So we're looking at a very small minority. But going back to what I was saying about these properties, to bring them up to these proposed standards, you'll have to remove the tenants, strip the property, fit extra insulation. Then we start talking about things like sound attenuation tests. That's another whole sector that needs to be considered, because that's all within this new legislation. Where are those tenants going to move to? Now, again, this is an unintended consequence. I totally understand the thought process behind it, but it's ill-conceived. You know, if we want to move down this zero carbon to this zero carbon environment, that's fine. So if we want to bring our green agenda forward, I agree that that's something we should look at, but not within the Landlords Act.
So is it a sledgehammer to crack a nut?
Absolutely, it's a sledgehammer to crack a nut.
Will this be a catch-all? I mean, somebody who's just got one apartment they've rented out or something, you know, as their sort of pension plan, and other people who are obviously seriously into quite big projects, you know, big landlords. I don't know if that's you or not, but you know, will it catch everybody?
Our association represents landlords of all sizes,
right,
and it absolutely will capture everybody, even people with holiday accommodation. If they decide to take winter lets, then they also now fall into this legislation.
And is it cost? And are you going to register, or what happens?
There will be a cost. You will have to register. You'll have to register every property you own.
Will it be inspected, or you don't know yet?
We don't know yet. We're still looking at primary legislation,
Right.
and all this will come with secondary legislation.
So there's a cost anyway to register.
There's huge costs, yeah, and of course there are knock-on effects with that. You know, let's be serious. Landlords already are some of the highest tax people on the Isle of Man. You know, rental income incurs a 20% tax rate. That's some of the highest on the island.
Are government talking to you? Who's putting this one through anyway? But I should know that. What's it fall under?
Department of Infrastructure.
All right.
And we have a new minister in there, Minister Baker.
Yeah.
A first-term MHK. Who
is he listening to you? Have you had meetings?
We've had a meeting.
Right.
And
how'd it go?
It went reasonably well, but I think there's a determination to push the legislation through. Nobody can object to wanting to improve standards for people living in substandard property. But to coin a phrase you just used, one doesn't need a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Right. Dialogue, engagement is a much better way of achieving this.
So up to now there's no sort of checks and balances at all? I mean, obviously something's really bad, someone can complain, I suppose, to somebody, but overall the government has no control over rentals and landlords.
Rentals in what respect?
Well, renting property. I mean.
Well, no. You've already asked that question. If a person's living in substandard accommodation, yeah, then yes, they have recourse to all sorts of government departments.
Yeah. So what's going to happen? Are you suggesting what?
I'm suggesting that we need to consider the bill in much more detail. In principle, there is no issue with registering landlords. However, you don't need the sledgehammer.
This has been on for years, though. I mean, it seems like the Quad administration, everything's being bunched up, and they're now running things at quite a rate.
I think that's the issue. You know, it's been brought forward previously. It was debated in Tynwald. Tynwald sent it to committee because they realised that it was a bigger subject, and there are consequences, and it's important to get it right. Committee reported back to Tynwald. A new bill has now been drafted, taking absolutely no account of the recommendations of the previous committee. So, what was the point? Right. You know.
Okay. Well, to finish with, are you looking for people to join your group? I mean, if people aren't already members, or should it even little people? I say little people. One person who's got one place. I mean,
every landlord is important. Every tenant is important. Yes, the Manx Landlords Association are looking to increase their membership.
How do they get hold of you? Is it a website?
Yep, Facebook, we have a website. We have a Facebook presence. It's very easy. Just type in Manx Landlords Association. Yeah. All the details are there.
And do you think they will push ahead, or do you think there will be a more interaction between you guys?
I would like to feel there'll be more interaction, because there'll certainly be pressure from the Landlords Association. We're not trying to sort of push this bill out completely. We're trying to reason with government and enter into a dialogue with government and put forward something that is fit for purpose.